The Feed.
What is Podcast X-Ray and why do you need it? The impact of podcast fame, podcast business, and controversial guests. Is it destroying podcasting? Hit skip or hit subscribe? Oh my gosh, the dilemma of podcast ads explored from both sides of the microphone. Let's be nice to people on the internet, okay? Podcast ads as a tool to get better at your own podcast promotion. What's that all about? And also, the Podcast Threads community is thriving, and we've got some thoughts around that. Hello, I am Elsie Escobar, Director of Community and Content for Libsyn, and this is episode 261 of The Feed, the official Libsyn podcast, the podcast that takes it beyond how to podcast, folks, into keeping you podcasting with podcasting tips and information for the everyday podcaster and taking you inside Libsyn. Really quick housekeeping as always. If you would like to get featured on the show, send in your 30-second promo, please. Now, how do you do it? You attach it to an email and send it to thefeed@libsyn.com. And, you know, this past year, I shifted it around. It's not just 30 seconds. If your promo is up to around 60 seconds, hey, send it over. If you don't have a promo, but you want your voice on the show, you can always ask us a question, or you can add to the conversation that you hear on an episode and send us voice feedback. We really slot those in about first come, first serve. And depending upon how much time we have on an episode, we'll play that feedback. We do our very best to play pretty much almost all of the feedback that we get at some point. You can also call us at 412-573-1934, or you can use SpeakPipe at speakpipe.com/thefeed. I'm going to add one other way for you to get your voice feedback to me, and that is for you to follow me on Instagram. I'm at the Elsie Escobar, and you can DM me a voice note. Tell me that it's part of the feedback for the feed. I'm super cool with that. I'll be keeping an eye out on our email and on my Instagram DMs. And, you know, I will let you know if I need more information from you. If not, you probably won't hear from me until you hear yourself on the show. It is first come, first serve as always. So the sooner you get your info, your promos, all of that stuff to me, the sooner that I will get it in the queue. And now on to our main conversation with, wait, I'm not going to tell you. It is not with Rob Walt, VP of Podcaster Relations at Libsyn. He is not here today, but we do have a guest co-host. Oh my gosh. Right after our very first promo of this episode, the main thing.
The foundation of a good life is learning. Learning from our experiences. Learning from one another. Learning from our peers, our friends, our business colleagues. Tune in to the Main Thing podcast. I'm your host, Skip Linneberg. We bring you a 9-minute dose of wisdom twice a month for free. Unique and useful wisdom lessons from entrepreneurs and entertainers, authors and athletes, poets, priests, and politicians. Listen as our wise guests respond to an incredibly revealing, soul-piercing question. What's the main thing you've learned in your lifetime so far? Get started now. Live wisely. Get better at life. All while you unload your dishwasher, fold your laundry, or brew a fresh pot of coffee. The Main Thing Podcast, your 9-minute dose of wisdom. Available everywhere you get your podcasts.
Hello, Eric.
Good generic time of the day, Elsie.
Yeah, this is so exciting. Obviously, you are not Rob. You are not Rob Walsh. I have a guest co-host today. This is Eric Fisher. Hello.
Thank you so much for having me. I am thrilled to be stepping into Rob's shoes. Rob, you have big shoes, maybe not literally, but especially figuratively. And with the feed being being my primary podcast about podcasting that I listen to, it's an honor and a privilege. I'm thankful so much to be here.
Yay, I'm so excited. That's so fun. It's so fun to have you here. I'm so excited. And I'm so excited to have you here because I've been listening to you for such a long time. We've known each other for such a long time. And also, I've been hearing you in some of my most favorite podcasts. Like when you were on Mac Power Users, and I was just like, that's such a trip that he's on the show. I was so jealous. But like all of these wonderful things that you've done as well. But tell us really quickly all about where we can find you really fast, and then we can get started.
Yeah, so I am the long-running host producer of Beyond the To-Do List. It is in its 12th year right now. Podcast about productivity. It's about more than just being more productive. It's about getting past the busyness and into the real meaning of productivity, living a more meaningful life.
Sweet. Look at that. Under 30 seconds, people. All right, so let's get started. We have so much to cover on this episode here, and I kind of wanted to start off with a little tool that is, I don't know if you've ever used a tool like this or you do, but I tend to for my job. It's called Podcast X-Ray, and it is from the Bumper team, and this is what it says on the website. Actually, there's a blog post that's going to be in the show notes, of course. The direct quote from the blog. Quote, most days I need to quickly get up to speed on a podcast I've never heard of before. I need a quick at a glance summary of things like basic show information, which language is spoken, is the show episodic or serial, which categories is the show listed in, publishing trends, what was the show first created, is it still active, how deep is the back catalog, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But that's end quote. So the reason that I love this tool, which you all need to figure out, is because at least for me, as somebody who's in the podcasting industry and often lurks at podcasts and wants to know more about you, especially around how long you've been around, where are you hosted, because sometimes that actually matters for a variety of different reasons. How many episodes you have and or the cadence. Are you still producing? Like there's just so many different things about it that this is a tool that I was like, are you kidding me? You don't understand how much I have to. Do you ever look at podcast RSS feeds, Eric?
I am not that nerdy, but this is a tool that would get me into it. This is a tool that seems great for podcasters who have heard that phrase of, well, there may already be a podcast out there about the topic you want to talk about, but there's not a show that you've made with your voice. This is a great tool to search what those other podcasts are and what they do and get all these kind of air quotes competitive discovery notes from them and use that. I mean, I'm going to use this again for a podcast that I've been working on for a while with somebody that we haven't yet launched yet. So,
that's so good. It is, but it's really great because you get an opportunity to look at so much information about a podcast and what's already within a podcast and how much information you can get out of it, meaning outside, obviously, of the content. I do feel that there's a lot of people who don't understand the wealth of information that's within the metadata of an RSS feed, like the actual information inside of an RSS feed. We often talk about you can subscribe to the RSS feed and we have to describe sort of like what is in an RSS feed. It's when you have an enclosure tag and you have an audio file and all this kind of stuff, but I think folks don't realize how much basic straight up information you have in an RSS feed and how helpful that is for you.
It almost feels like, when you go to YouTube, there's a gear button. You can turn on I think it's called something like nerdy details or something like that. And then it'll show some of this type of stuff for the YouTube video that you're watching on screen while you're doing it, like frame rate and resolution and other different things like that. So it feels a little similar.
It is. It's so cool. It is. It's kind of like going into websites and doing that whole, what is it? Control. I don't remember what it is, but you can find control. Is it F? Control F is find. But anyway, you can see all the
like developers tools or look at this page like a developer or something.
Yeah. Yeah. And sometimes you can find out so much stuff in there. So I would say to y'all, check some of this stuff out. You might use it for all kinds of research. And if you work in the podcasting industry, for me, as somebody who is a mentor and or consultant on all kinds of different types of projects that center podcasts, this tool expedites my work so much faster. If I'm asked to do a strategy around being able to look at podcast A versus podcast B and make a strategic assessment as to what their execution, that their cadence in production is, what type of things they're putting out there, all kinds of just basic insight to be able to give somebody advice into, hey, do you want to replicate this kind of production? Do you this publishing cadence, all kinds of things like that. It just helps me make an analysis around that easier because I don't have to spend time figuring all that stuff out for myself because it's a time saver.
Yeah, exactly. Well, and as a podcaster and a productivity podcaster at that, this is like the Venn diagram sweet spot for me tool wise. So love it.
I love it. So good. Helpful. So it's time to bookmark, put it in there. And I guess the only key in terms of productivity is remembering that the solution already exists, because that's my problem when it comes to productivity. I find the solution and then I promptly forget, and I have to refine that same solution again because my brain forgot it. All right. So moving on, speaking of that, finding out about podcasts. And one of the things that this tool with the Podcast X-Ray is that it looks at monetization. It looks at, is it free to listen? Does it offer paid subscriptions and all that kind of stuff? And I'm sure that, folks have been not that necessarily thinking that subscriptions are the only way to monetize, but there's been a lot of discussion on the social spheres and or podcasting community that is around podcast ads. And we're going to dive deep into some of this podcast advertising conversation. And we're going to start with a YouTube video that is titled "The Downfall of Modern Podcasts." I'm going to have you guys listen to just a couple of minutes from this video, and we're going to chat a little bit about that.
The problem starts becoming apparent when you start looking at guests. In the beginning, you want fantastic guests who can arrive and change people's lives and give people so much information and get massive amounts of views and grow your channel to 5 million subscribers. But you will exhaust the amount of great guests very soon. And you can get those guests back on, or what we're starting to see is you bring on guests not who are known for being factually correct or objective, but that will cause controversy, cause a rift between the followers, cause massive amounts of engagement, cause people to be so outraged that they go and watch the podcast just to see what's factually incorrect in it, and of course, get huge amounts of views. You'll even notice that the thumbnail for the episode is changed every hour on the hour, 12 hours after the podcast is released, to see which thumbnail causes people to click on the most. There is a science to this, and they're choosing titles that are provocative, intriguing, but we're now at the point where people are just looking to piss people off. And if that means you're using misinformation, if it brings you views, and it brings you listens, and it brings you attention, that's not only going to bring you more money from sponsors, it's also going to give you more prospects to sell the business in which you're promoting.
All right, Eric, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I would be lying if I didn't say this was already on my mind before I saw this video, especially in light of recently being at a podcast conference. And honestly, I've been trying to think back, and you might have some insight here, Elsie. At what point do you feel that the door cracked open and then was busted down in terms of constant emails of people pitching to be on shows, especially when they're not shows that are interview shows like this one per se? Mine is, but man, I just think that I have to be so protective is probably not the right word, but I want to say that anyway. Protective of my audience, but it's more about giving them value. And I can't just have quantity over quality. It doesn't make sense. Now, a lot of people would say, well, if you're doing a weekly show and you're doing 4 episodes in a month, why not do 5? Why not do 6? Why not do 2 episodes a week? Because then you're giving that much more value. But my thing is are you really? Because I'll be honest, when it comes to even some of the most favorite podcasts that I listen to, I don't listen to every episode.
Yeah.
I listen to most of the episodes, but it's always the ones that are either the most intriguing topic-wise or guest-wise when it comes to interview podcasts. So quality over quantity is not a solution here.
Yeah, no, and I think that there's something to be said outside of the money-making part of it all, because I think that that's a separate conversation here. But I feel the heaviness. I feel the stress of having to find a guest to have on my show for the next week if I'm doing a weekly show. And I know that there's people who do the whole batch thing. Believe me, I have heard all the workflows, and I'm sure you have a workflow around how you batch people and you record people and then you do, I don't know what your process is really. Actually, why don't you go ahead and tell us what your process is, if it's like week to week or batching?
It is definitely not week to week, but in the early days it was. And I felt the weight of it, having to scramble to get 1, messages out there to recruit, 2, get a yes, 3, schedule it, 4, record it, 5, edit it, 6, publish it. Oh my gosh. I am so glad we're way beyond those days, at least for me.
Yeah.
And I worked towards, and a lot of people will say this, like, you work towards batching. And thing is that doesn't work for everybody, but you have to at least have some sort of margin there.
Yeah.
Whether it's 2, 3, 4 weeks. I stay at about a 3 to 4 week recording / publishing so that my editor and I can make sure that there's no hiccups or issues or headaches we cause each other first and foremost. But beyond that, I've got to be thinking out like I look at the quarter, each quarter at a time, and kind of try to find what's interesting to me. What do I think will be helpful to my guests? What questions have they sent to me topic wise that I can address? Who can I find to speak to that? That's been kind of the approach that I've taken. And I take it as a 2 to 3 month chunk at a time. And of course, then there's always like, hey, Cal Newport has a new book coming out, and they email you, or Seth Godin, who reached out. And I'm like, what? Of course it's a yes.
Yeah. You're like,
But those are anomalies. You can't plan on the exception. You have to create a workflow rule. You have to be thinking in the future.
I do feel that heaviness, and also, I don't know how much vetting you do for guests. And one of the concerns that I have, because the only way that I can frame this in my head in terms of guests is we do a partner webinar once a month. And I think we're going to do some of those all the way till mid-year. We might pivot a little bit towards the second, the third and fourth quarter. But the way that I think about these partnered webinars is everything you just mentioned, meaning, first of all, our audience of podcasters want to know what are those questions that they are constantly wondering about? What are those things that I wish that more podcasters knew about at a deeper level, that maybe it's like giving them their medicine that they don't want to take? And I try to wrap it into something that they do want, like, that they're like, oh, I want to go find out how to make $1 million tomorrow, and not that I ever really put that out there, but to give them that sort of thing. And also, then I have to align it to what the business wants, right? So what Libsyn wants in terms of being able to who we want to be in the podcasting industry, what type of services we want to be able to make sure people know about. And all of that is like cloaked very nicely in a package. It's never salesy, but it's more about brand recognition and things like that. So I have to really think through that. And then to add the layer of who are the people that you're constantly hearing about? Who are the amazing people who never get a chance to be on a stage, who are just brilliant that nobody really knows about and needs to know about? So that's yet another layer of things that I want to have. I really want to tap into all of that. And then you start the conversation. Then you're like, hey, are you wanting to do this? Hey, this is where I feel we need to have this conversation. And all of that is a big lift because it requires lots of thinking, lots of vetting, and we only have one, right? So we're not doing 4 a month. We're doing 1, and it takes a lot of resources, I feel, for me and our team to just vet the people. I have to then think through the value of the conversation and how helpful it is to our audience, and then how it aligns with all of these other little pieces. To me, it's a highly curated type of thing.
Well, and there's even another dimension to it where you need to know that they can, even if they know what they're talking about, can they articulate it
exactly well? That's the part.
And
yeah.
What's great is that podcasters, if they're going as guests on other podcasts or webinars or YouTube video shows, you can look them up and you can go and you can watch them. It's been one of my secret sauce elements for a long time is I get a pitch, I go look them up and ask and, see, okay, well, what can they speak on that they said they could in that email? and how would my questions fit into what their talking points are? But also, let's go a level deeper. I hear them say their talking points. How can I come up with follow-up questions that the other host didn't that fit my audience?
Yes. And that's the key right there. I think that that's what an amazing resource. And this is a testament to, I feel, whenever I do have some of the experts that we do have in the partner webinars, I have done substantial research on a specific subject matter expert, because a lot of the time when I have them in, I am having them in to answer a very specific problem that podcasters are having, a very narrow conversation. And then I have found some people who are really crazy smart, but maybe they're not ready to do this type of an event. You know, it's, mind you, we do have video and it is a little bit more, right? So there's no editing in between to make, and because we know how to make each other sound good in post-production audio wise, so that you really craft the conversation in a way that's really empowering to the guest. But when you have people live, you have to know that they know how to handle that. And that's another skill set that I look for to see, like, wow, they'd be really great on camera, you know? And that's, it's how I make sometimes decisions based on, wow, they're really entertaining. They know their stuff. They're very entertaining. They've got high quality, not high quality as in like fancy setup, but they care about the way that they present themselves. So it doesn't necessarily need fancy camera, fancy lighting, fancy microphone. But I do care about you taking the time to be in the best situation that you can to sound good. That's just basic, right? And I love to be able to do that. Okay, so thinking through that and then going through to, you now are in a position where your livelihood, Eric Fisher, is based on the amount of episodes that you put out, and add to that the ads that are on your show and how many people are consuming this content, either via YouTube views and or download numbers. And your family is tied to this, meaning you got to bring that money home.
The podcast bacon.
The podcast bacon. And it's a business. If you have a less than stellar guest, if you have a guest that has a big reach, that has reached out to you, maybe doesn't align with your audience as much, but you know what? People want to hear from them. What are your thoughts about that? Like,
there's a temptation there for sure. I mean, there's been some, luckily for me, there's not been an absolute no for any of the really large names that have come to me. Now, there have been some that have been large, but like I hadn't heard of them. So that's already kind of a sign right there. 2, if their topic doesn't really align, but they have huge numbers, it's like, hey, they've got a newsletter that's got hundreds and hundreds and thousands of people, and this is our open rate, and this is our click-through. I pause for a second and think, okay, well, even if their message and or their talking points, their expertise, in other words, even if they aren't perfectly aligned, can I go beyond the to-do list? Right. Can I stretch? Can I still attach some kind of lesson and learning and meaning here? I do a double take. I will take a little closer look because of that, but it's never going to fully sway. I mean, it's always got to be that I feel comfortable with the episode being a certain level of quality. And that always comes first, unfortunately, or fortunately for the audience. You have to consider that as a podcast producer, as a host, you have to consider all those variables. And I think the most important one is, will this person be able to deliver value to your audience with the expectations that your audience has of your show?
And then what about the misinformation of it all?
Luckily, that is definitely something I don't play around with. I like to try and stay as clear and clean as possible. And again, if something was potentially misinformational, like somebody said, I'm not even going to make something up because it'll be taken as fact.
Yeah, totally. I get it.
But say somebody comes in and says, hey, there's this new productivity tip. Oh, I know. I've got an example that where Kramer on Seinfeld, where you only sleep like a half hour at a time every 2 to 3 hours. And you then have all this extra time, and that's all the sleep that you need. And honestly, a guest actually tried that out just as one of his experiments.
Yeah,
he talked about it. And he said, oh, yeah, no, that doesn't work. But say he did say it worked. Like,
Yeah.
I'd be fascinated. I'd be like, okay, well, grain of salt. I would couch things in protecting the audience and saying the views of the guest may not necessarily reflect the views of the host in this one, but I thought it was interesting enough for you to hear this and, test it out for yourself or something. But yeah, luckily I'm not that big, and I don't have to, I don't have people pounding down my door that have misinformation written all over it.
I think that that's a part of the workflow that didn't quite exist in the past, which is that QA of your work after you finish recording, and to really listen not only for aspects that might be problematic and or are not backed by fact, adding disclaimers to the conversation, and also to protect your brand in some way of whatever a guest says on your show, it is reflective of your brand. Like, I'm thinking like you gave them the platform. And I think that that's where this is being challenged, that there are some people coming onto these really, really massive platforms where the way that a lot of these long form podcasts are consumed nowadays is in short snippets. And maybe if you listen to the entire conversation, you could make your own decision. You could, talking about the guy that you said, you don't sleep all day or whatever, like little bits and all through the day, that maybe you do have a part in your show where you say, scientists don't prove this, or, actually, if you don't sleep for whatever, it can really harm you, XYZ. I'll hear these studies, just letting you guys know and let your audience be informed about that. But then the bit that is shared on social is just the hack.
Well, and I think that's really playing into the marketing side of things. And what this video has talked about a bit is this sensationalism idea.
Yes.
It's almost a 24-hour news cycle snippet version of podcasts now, where you grab the thing that is going to get the person to either be like, wait, what? In one way or the other, like, oh, I've got to try that. I got to hear the rest of this. Or that's completely absurd. I've got to hear the rest of this
Right.
to get the ears.
I think that that's the biggest thing. And mind you, it is a tactic, I think, in marketing. It gives marketing sometimes has already bad things tied to it, like just icky for the majority of podcasters. Like, podcasters are like, oh, marketing is so bad. And stuff like this really doesn't help the case, because it's like,
No,
it just doesn't help, right? But let's go ahead and continue to move through the podcast ad conversations here. I did see Aaron Mahnke that he posted some thoughts on Threads, and this is what he said. So I'm just going to read what he wrote so that we can kind of discuss some of this. And he wrote, quote, "I'm getting really tired of deceptive companies and organizations publishing podcast ads for programmatic ad directories, the radio type ads that get inserted into most podcasts now, who hide their true message by placing their ad in an unrelated category. When listeners hear divisive ads like that, they unsubscribe, and there's nothing I can do to get them back. I realize the new world of podcast advertising is all about pre-made radio-style ads that get inserted magically by the ad server, but the controls and guardrails are almost non-existent for most podcasters, and it's making me feel more and more guilty every day for needing to run ads to pay my staff. Old man voice. I very much miss the old days of podcast advertising. Sigh." End quote.
crazy. Yeah. I follow Aaron on Threads, where this is from, and I really appreciate his wisdom. I was able to say so to his face and shake his hand at Podfest, and that was great. And I really could tell, like, he was glad to hear somebody not just say, "Hey, I love your show," but like, "Hey, thank you for being a human online."
Yeah.
To us podcasters. So I think this is definitely something that, well, when I first saw him write this and the preceding thread describing the specifics of it, I thought to myself, oh crap, is this happening on my show?
Yeah.
And how can I figure out how? And I don't know that there's an easy answer there, because like everybody else who's done dynamic ads, or at least should be doing with your dynamic ads, or when you allow programmatic ads to supplement, which is what this is, go through the topics, or I should say the categories that are available, and opt out of No political ads, no this, that, the ones that don't make sense for your show. And what he's describing here is an ad came through on his show that was in a category, or should have been in a category he had already opted out of. But because of the way they designed the ad, they were able to market as something else, and it showed up. And so I feel for him. And again, I really think that this is something that there's got to be a little bit more due diligence on the programmatic side and the programmatic provider and producer side of things when it comes to this, that, oh, this ad is multi-tiered, multi-pronged, multi-categoried, if you will. And we need to, as podcast producers, be made aware of that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think that part of it is that we don't know what we don't know, right? Because this is at scale now. And the need for these ads to have the reach that they're looking for, sometimes they will wrap themselves to look like something that they're not. And it's the other end of it all, meaning there's the podcast conversation that we were just having about, having people come on that are possibly not saying the right thing and all of this kind of stuff on the big podcasts. And this is from the advertising side of things, where you don't know what you don't know. And I think what the challenge with the programmatic is that you don't know what's coming up for somebody because they're so smart. The programmatic ads, sometimes they're based on geographic areas. Sometimes they're based on a time amount, right? So on, let's say, Valentine's Day, we need to run this campaign. And you may or may not hear it. And the only way for you to hear that ad is if you download that episode that day and it's showing up at that time, because that's the magic of programmatic, that you can resell your episodes. You just have the slots and then there's a different ad that comes up. That's the challenge sometimes when I hear things like that. And oh gosh, it's rough because there's been a couple of times, has nothing to do with podcasting, but it is kind of the way that programmatic works. I was watching, I don't know if it was Peacock or Hulu with ads. And I was washing dishes and this ad came on that I was surprised by the person who was doing the ad. I don't know who it was. It was like whatever company it was. I was like, oh my God. And I really liked the way that the ad was created. And by the time I finished, I was washing dishes. By the time I took off my gloves and did my hands and I wanted to look on my iPad, it was gone. And I wanted to listen to it. I wanted to take a screenshot of it. I wanted to do all kinds of stuff. I know that random geeky marketing things, right? But I realized that the moment was lost. That's what programmatic sometimes is like, where it's over. You just had the experience and you'll hear feedback about it, but you can't pinpoint that it actually happened. So it's like,
well, the one advantage I will say that podcasts have over that Hulu or Peacock experience you just had is the file downloaded and you can hit rewind and you can go back because those ads were inserted, but they are now part of that file that is on your device. In Aaron's case here, I think him having some sort of, and other podcasters for that matter, if something plays and you can tap into your community that listens to your show and gets back to you. I wish that if somebody heard a divisive ad on his show, that they would reach out to him with the show date and time it downloaded. They can maybe see that, where their location is, and even a copy of it or some, you can clip it out, have it playing out loud on your device while something else, another device hits record or whatever, and send that file off to him. So he's got documentation to go to with any kind of evidence or, hey, look, this is supposed to be in a different category. I mean, I hate having to do that, but at least we have a little bit of ammunition when it comes to that. And again, divisive is subjective.
Exactly.
What we're really getting to the root here is miscategorization of ads.
Yeah.
When they're programmatic.
Absolutely. And I think that that's the core there. And part of it is there's so many prongs to this because I feel at this point, it's not necessarily going like, that's your responsibility. It's a holistic approach to whose responsibility it is because we're rediscovering all of this together. And I see it with my kid, making sure that just parenting as a whole. All in all, parenting. There's almost never a time where you can just take on all of the responsibility for getting whatever something is done, even if it's as simple as homework, right? It is not solely my responsibility to make my child do homework, because there has to be a buy-in from the kid, because that's actually the most important part there, for them to be able to take responsibility for their own actions and how they prepare for the world. There's also a responsibility in terms of the teacher, how the teacher approaches the situation. What does happen in terms of homework? Are they actually getting, whatever it is that they need to get done out of it all? Then there's the whole family situation too. So anyway, it's never just one thing there. And I think that we have the privilege of developing the industry that we want to have. And we get a chance to be able to look at it through that lens and be like, we need to cast a little bit of light on this. We got to look at this with big eyes and see, how can we collectively address this issue? I see you, advertiser. You need as many ears on your stuff as possible. What can we do to help that without miscategorizing your thing, right? And then also for the company that is right in between of it all, what is it that we can build within because safety has come up a lot in terms of programmatic and advertisers and things like that. Like, what are some parameters and workflows that are not going to be so time consuming and so just, in terms of, could you imagine having to spot check all the ads, the amount of just office work, if you will, time. And it's like,
yeah. Can't imagine.
It's a lot, it's a lot. So how do you optimize that so that everybody can get because then they also have to sell ads. I mean, there's just so many different layers to that. And also on the producer end of things too, just because you turn something on, there are going to be some people who are just going to be like, yep, bring it on, all the categories. And then there's folks,
yeah, I know.
Yeah. And then sometimes that's not the case. You really do want to have, how do we serve all of that? And I think there's no one answer. We collectively have to help each other be better at this. And I'm leaning on the positivity side of it all, that most people are not trying to be malicious. They are sometimes making decisions because they're uninformed and they don't exactly know what they're dealing with at times. And part of us is taking responsibility to educate ourselves at all levels of how everything works and continue to move forward.
It's kind of like serving up a Facebook ad. I have some experience in this regard, to any and everyone instead of targeting it correctly.
Yes.
And the reason you want to do that, so that you as the producer of the ad and your ad spend is spent correctly. You can spend and spend and spend and get lots of eyeballs and listens on things. But if you're targeting the wrong people, you are getting no yield or ROI from that. So I think it's also a missed opportunity on the ad spender to not have done the correct research for which shows they're appearing on.
Yes, absolutely. 100%. That said, though, there's a lot of conversations from the end user perspective as well. We're talking about it from the business side of it or from the producer side of it all. But again, on Threads, I also saw this woman get completely reamed on social because she said this, quote, "List of things that are overrated. Podcast ads. Never, ever have I cared for a brand featured on a podcast. Just let me listen to this episode in peace." End quote. And man, she got herself in hot water. Oh, Eric.
I saw this right when it came out, before the piling on happened. And I thought, oh, well, one, the way you're crafting this thread, I almost said tweet, but a thread, the way you're crafting it, list of things, and you name one thing.
Yeah.
Come on. At least read into their poorly read host ads.
Yeah.
And now she gives one real reason. And for her, she says, never have I ever cared for a brand featured on a podcast. And I'll be honest, as somebody who's listened to podcasts for almost 20 years now, which feels insane to say, but we're coming up on that next year. I care. I have heard great things. I have heard amazing ads for products I didn't know about that I have learned from. Now, is it rife for parody? Yes. But the thing is that I get it. Just let me listen to this episode in peace. I totally get it. But I think this person's exaggerating. But oh my gosh, you go into the comments on this thing and it's a back and forth between some people calling her things,
Yes.
and that I won't go into, and others who are saying, well, how do you expect the people to make any kind of living? Podcasting is not cheap.
Yeah.
And I come from both sides of it. I am an avid listener and a producer. So I know that there's got to be a compromise there somewhere. And that's a line we all are trying to figure out how to walk. As we were just talking about, this is a continuation of that conversation, really.
Yeah, no. And then I think that together we can figure it out as well. I think that my biggest issue with this whole thing is the way people are with each other online. I'm not cool with that. I also saw this post before anybody even responded to it almost. It was like a couple of people or something. And I immediately thought like, that's not the best thread to put out there. And my immediate thought was, you know what? I actually have cared for many brands. In fact, the majority of things that I bought have been... It's because of a podcast. So I am the poster child for being influenced by podcast ads. I am here for that. I can name so many brands and or particularly products, online products, digital products and apps that I have purchased because of podcast ads. But what I was not okay with was the piling on of this, like, how can we be civil to one another? Then after a while, I wanted to start to sit there and support. I was going to reach out to her and say, are you okay, dude? Because I'm so sorry. Podcasters are usually not this horrible.
Yeah. Well, it's that disconnect between online discourse and face-to-face discourse, which we always have to be aware of. And I mean, if I had a little pocket Tom Webster here that could come out and give you stats, I would have him speak to all the stats. Here's me trying to avoid misinformation.
Yeah.
But one thing that we've heard again and again from people who have done research and continue to do so, like Tom, is that podcast advertising works. She may be putting ahead her feelings about not wanting to hear ads and that she's never decided to care, but that doesn't mean that for others it doesn't. And we need to keep that in mind, that the squeaky wheels do get the most noise and attention, but that doesn't mean that the large connection or percentage of our listeners either have issues or have issues like we were just talking about when there's a mismatch. I think that's part of this whole ecosystem, is thinking about, again, even going back to the conversation about guests, it's always a constant podcast producer concern / workflow issue. How am I best serving my audience? At the same time, how am I best serving myself? And I love Venn diagrams. So it's, where does the middle of those two circles meet? Yep. And there's probably a third one for advertisers. Mm-hmm. How do we serve them as well if they're part of our monetization package?
100% on all of that. In fact, I think that this is a great time for us to talk about our second promo of the episode, which is a really cool topic and right in alignment with what we're looking at here. And this was somebody who actually sent this message to me via Instagram, private audio message that I requested when I did one of our online partnered webinars. And it's called, Where is the Line?
Hey, LZ. Thank you for the very informative session today. Very useful. So my podcast is called Where is the Line, where we explore the gray areas of life, of which there are many, across personal as well as work life. And so we cover a spectrum of topics, including career versus identity, where is the line? Or renting versus owning, the dilemma. Ethics in AI, where is the line? Or boundaries versus control in relationships, as well as balancing new mom, work, wife, friends. And again, where is the line in that? So that's the podcast. And you can see it doesn't fall into one genre in particular, but we cover an array of topics. Thank you so much.
Pretty good, right? Right on topic. Where is the line?
More than ironically perfect here. And I think, and one, I love the concept. This is a great premise for a show.
Yes.
Which that's what you want to always be. You don't want to just come in and think, well, I'm going to talk about this topic. No, it's what's your angle? What's your premise for your show? Not just your topic. And this is a great topic. And honestly, one that I kind of tackle in my own show. So I think she's found a new listener.
Yeah, I know. I'm really curious about this too, because, and one, just really quickly, just to talk about this, in terms of the title, it is such a broad subject to me because it lends itself to something that I feel a lot of us are coming up against now that I've been around for a couple of decades in the medium. You do start to see that I'm not the same person that I was 20 years ago. I feel that it would not be okay for me to be the same person talking about the same things. I mean, other than podcasting, because obviously I'm still here, but it lends itself to the growth that I might have. I might start the show talking about where is the line between in politics and conversations around political issues. And then what if I then became a mom? Where's the line around parenting things? And then maybe later on, I'm dealing with, aging parent. Where's the line as we deal with the medical industry or retirement communities or whatever happens when parents get older and all that kind of stuff? That just allows for a bigger growth. So yay. And now moving forward again with another thought, and this is from Ariel Nissenblatt, actually, where she was actually talking about podcast ads as they pertain to marketing and learning. And she said, quote, I almost never skip ads. Here are a few reasons why. It's interesting to hear how many favorite shows are advertising for the products that support their show. Sometimes funny, sometimes straightforward. I'll take note of which products are supporting podcasts and they want to support my show. I analyze how ad campaigns for similar products change over the years and months. Hearing their spots make me better at writing ad copy, general copy for my own show. End quote. Do you listen to podcast ads?
I do. And some people would say, wait, what? I'm like, yeah. Thing is like, we can't all be Conan O'Brien, who just, I mean, if you've ever heard him do an ad read, they're hilarious. However, I can only listen to that joke of an ad read. I mean that in the most endearing of terms.
Yeah.
Creatively read, off the cuff, does his talking points, does it right. But if I've heard it already 2 or 3 times, then I'm kind of in the mode of starting to skip. Does that make sense?
Yep.
But not all of our shows fit that we go into reading the ad read, nor do I think most advertisers think it's appropriate. Now, for him, I think they're like, no, do it, because the more memorable you make it, it sticks in your head. And clearly I've heard of things, and there's even catchphrases that have come out of his ad reads that I have in my head now that I'll say once in a while just as jokes. So it works. But the thing is that I think if you're a podcast producer, if you're not listening to ads that are on other shows that you listen to and taking notice of, one, I love what she's saying here about, hey, which products are out there advertising? Because you never know what else is out there that you don't have yet that you want to reach out to and make a list of for yourself if you're reaching out yourself, or an agency if you're working with one like I do. So having any kind of knowledge in that sense and awareness is great. But then to be able to reverse engineer and have almost like an audio swipe file of what works, what doesn't when it comes to copy or sound design or hooks or how you presented that product. And even thinking about that in terms of, well, this show I'm listening to isn't like mine. How would I do that would address my audience in their pain point versus the pain point from this show I'm listening to? And can I get them, and can I sway them with me presenting them my way of doing it that would be appropriate for my audience? One, Ariel's one of my favorite people to follow.
Yeah.
And so when she said this, I was like, yes to this. I think I reposted it and said that exactly. This is what I do. I want to be on top of things, because part of the craft, if you're doing ads in your show, part of your podcasting craft is doing your ads well if you're doing host read ads. So this is part of that.
We've already, actually, I'm not sure we've talked enough about the listener end of it all, meaning just as a podcast fan, podcast listener. I do skip them. I skip a lot of them. But again, I'm obsessed with the podcast that I listen to, and inevitably I'm going to forget to skip one time, and or again, I have purchased those products. And I think that that's when I skip stuff sometimes, when I have heard that ad for the 100th time and I've already bought it. You know what I mean? It's like,
yes.
Honestly, I'm done with this. I get it. I know that. And then there's some stuff that's just not for me, you know, and I'm just whatever. I skip them. So in that respect, as a listener, I'm done. But as a podcast producer, you really nail it there, because one of the key issues, in fact, my latest newsletter was around this. Podcasters have a very, very hard time promoting themselves, period. I find it's two ends of the spectrum. Spectrum side number one is they're completely embarrassed to even tell people about their podcast, and they feel so guilty to even share that they have an episode, and they feel like all like weirded out by the whole thing, and it's like, yes, I have a podcast, it's, and you're like, what's your what? And they don't say it. Then there's the other side, which is the look at me, the latest episode, I'm about me and everything's about you, and you're constantly pitching your show. And I'm like, oh my God, just chill out. It's not just about you. I don't want to know about your show every time, every comment. This is so-and-so from the whatever podcast. And every single post or comment is a pitch, underhanded. I hate that too. So that's what I see. But I don't see the organic balance of the Venn diagram that you have. And I feel that listening to ads can be helpful to you to learn exactly what you said. Frameworks, templates, things that worked, things that didn't. What's the hook? How did they say the call to action? What were the words that were used? Tap through, listen here, engage with us at, or whatever, right? All of those things are so important. And also to know that some of these ads are they're quite short, and some of them are very, very effective, and they are right on point, funny, entertaining, memorable, and short. Whoa. You know what I mean? I love that. I think that you're right. I feel we need to study them a little bit better. And I did a webinar with Lisa Orkin, who is somebody who has she's a creative. Not only does she do creativity things for herself, she's made some incredible podcasts out there, all kinds of different types of shows that she's put together. She's also a comedian, and she's also an audio producer, and she writes copy for podcast ads. And this webinar, I'm going to put a link in the show notes there. She gave some very, very actionable things that you can do to up-level your copy for podcast ads. And I'm not thinking like, even if you're not working with an advertiser, you have to still advertise yourself. And that is a key thing that we need to look through there.
I think there's one other dimension that as podcast producers, we should be paying attention to for the sake of the listener. And I actually would love to hear listeners give true, honest feedback on this. For people who skip or listen to ads and shows they love, I would love to know what they think / feel when it comes to the amount of ads per episode, as well as the location of ads per episode. Now, typically, you know, if we go to the 101, we'd say, okay, there's pre-roll, there's mid-roll, there's post-roll. It's not that simple, because in each of those spots, you've got, oh, do I do 1? Do I do 2? Is 3 too much? And then in the mid-roll, you've got them scattered throughout. Like, is there 1 between each segment of our show, or is 2 to 3 in the middle of the show and that's it? I mean, for those that skip, hey, as a podcast producer, I put them all in one place. So if you're going to skip them, it's easy for you. Here you go. But I want to know from a listener's side of things what they think or feel about the length of an episode compared to how many are acceptable ad-wise, being subjective because some are short, like you just said. I want to hear more from actual listeners. There's a study there to be done, for sure.
Yeah. You're right. Absolutely. I would love to get feedback from whenever we have like an ad in between a show. We don't have ads obviously on the show, but to be able to have somebody go like, we really love that. Not so much. You're right. I think that that's a part that we really need to look at. Okay, so I recognize that a lot of our conversations today have been based on grabbing conversations that I've been seeing on Threads. In fact, the majority of the things that we talked about this time were about that. We do have some audio feedback that I thought it's going to be a little bit too much, so you guys will hear it in our next episode here. But Threads has become a place, I think, for me, that I have been watching a lot more of the podcasting community talk with each other, and I'm enjoying it.
Yeah, I am too. And I think because the more we talk about the thing we're talking about, the more that's what we see. I mean, I can tell you right now, the majority, 80+% of what's not in my following feed, but my For You feed is podcasting. For better or for worse, there's obviously some hot takes that are in there that we've talked about today. But at the same time, I love it. I love that I didn't have to go join. I know that there are things out there like Discord communities and Facebook groups and and you can join those, and that's great. And I still am kind of considering doing some of that. But Twitter was always my favorite social media platform. Yeah. Threads has supplanted that for sure. Yeah. And just the more you throw out there what you want to see, the more you get that back. I've never seen that algorithmically happen as quickly as it did once I started to. I mean, don't get me wrong. Threads started, I thought, I don't know about this. And as I still check back in every once in a while, and now more frequently, multiple times a day, and the fact that they've got things you can do like podcast threads. And what I mean by that is it's essentially hashtags.
It's a hashtag. Yeah.
The fact that you can do that and use that. And when you do that, people that are following that jump in on that. And then you're talking with other podcasters about podcasting. And because of all that algorithmic juice with all the meta tag / searching what you're saying and what others are saying that you're saying replies to, and vice versa, it feeds into the algorithm of what you are served on Threads. And I love it. I do. I really do.
Yeah, me too. I've been enjoying it to be able to see things like that. And I feel that the reason that Threads is working for me, it's because it doesn't feel as big of a lift as like a Discord server, simply because in the Discord servers, it feels like there's a lot happening, or like a Slack channel, right? When it's like the conversation in the middle, then there's the left-hand side with all of the other places, all the channels you can go to, and then you can see all those, and then you have to catch up on the responses, or if you don't have to do any of that stuff, but if you do want to participate, it feels like you have to do a lot more reading and a lot more, I got to really scroll through this, and there's a lot more to it. And Threads feels like I can very quickly go in there and scan through conversations and get enough in a pretty short amount of time. Like I can be there for 30 seconds or a minute, scroll through really quickly, and be done with it.
Yeah, I've got one of those notifications, or the pop-ups. It's not safety. I forget what it's called. It's like quality of life or something similar that Instagram / Threads has. And I've got it turned on that if I'm on there for 10 minutes, it pops up and says time for a break. And I typically will not say not now and tap that. Yes. I'm like, no, you know what? I'm good. Thank you. And I will opt out. And if there was a 5-minute one, I'd probably there might be. I don't think there is. I went for the lowest time just to be like, okay, look, if I'm going to jump in and do this, I want to do it for a little bit and then jump out and feel like I'm healthy.
Yeah.
And that's what it feels like. It feels like opening up a text thread with friends.
That's right.
And or some acquaintances, strangers, and talking about a topic you love, because that's what you've been talking about, and it feeds you more of that.
I love the fact that I've met a lot of new people that I didn't know existed. So I do feel the algorithm isn't skewed towards large accounts. And that to me is so eye-opening. And I love that because I can be responding to somebody's conversation that has 48 people following them, but they really align with the type of person that I really love. And I started to see like how much we tend to, in quote, judge folks based on their following, whatever that might be, meaning like, ooh, they have such a big following. They responded to me. And I have found that I don't look at people that way in Threads as much at all, really. I just will respond to people and I follow people just because of that. And I also like the intersection of all of the things that I love. I have a lot of really interesting food things coming up, like quick recipes. I have all types of like analog stuff like fountain pens and journaling things and people that are taking pictures that I love. I'm like a huge fan of any Ghibli related, the Ghibli Studios and all of their movies. And I see all kinds of really cute things from there. And I love that. And of course, all the podcasting stuff too. So I get to go in there and play with all that. It feels like a really easy place for me to engage with that I can quickly leave and not feel like it's not so doom and gloomy in there. I can get my doom and gloom elsewhere, and there's plenty of it. And I can do that and curate it and be ready for it. And so at this point, Threads feels like a place to go. So I'm inviting all of you listening to come and hang out over on Threads.
Yeah. And you can post on podcast threads and you'll get seen by us, and we'll probably talk with you. Until you said it, it's funny. I didn't realize that, I've not clicked through to someone's profile to see, man, how many followers do they have? How important are they? Like I know I used to click through on like Twitter. I just don't do that now. I don't think about that. I think about, oh, that was an interesting thing they said. Do I have a reply? Yes or no? Or if I don't, but I like what they said, I can literally just like it and move on, like nodding my head. It's almost like being in a circle at a conference in a hallway and someone walks up and then they have an interesting comment. I don't pull my phone out and check them out online while they're standing there, right? It's just so much more human, and I love that.
Yeah, I'm digging that. I hope that the marketers really kind of stay away. There are some marketing people in there that are really like doing the thing, and of course, everybody's looking to get engagement also, because Libsyn is on there too, and I've been watching those conversations in there, and I'm really wanting to see what is the differentiator for a brand there that isn't about, there's some things that I feel work in other platforms that don't work on Threads. I'm also trying to see, there's a lot more people. We always had like a Friday promote yourself thread for years. I've been running that for, oh my God, I cannot even remember the first time I started to do that. And it's always been great. It was one of the first, it was one of the only for many, many, many years of those types of engagement type prompts that we used to put out there because everybody would ask us about to do that for us. And now there's so much of that on Threads that I'm trying to rethink, like, what can we do on Fridays that will be beneficial to the community to get them seen and heard that is outside of post your latest episode. So I'm thinking through that because everybody's constantly wanting to promote themselves, but I am getting a little sick of that. So I'm like, how do we do it? Anyway, I'm going to actually put in here promo number 3. This is from Tomorrow's Legends, and then we're going to close it out, folks. Here is Tomorrow's Legends.
And now, here are your hosts, the Scarlet Speedster himself, the Flash, the Maid of Mischief Harley Quinn, and the Blue Beacon of Hope, X-Force 11.
That would be us. Thanks, Dan. Flash here, and I was thinking, it's pretty difficult to become Legends of Tomorrow if people don't know about us. Right, guys?
I see what you did there. But you're right. We started off talking about DC's superhero show, Legends of Tomorrow. But then we branched out to cover other superhero-related shows.
Yeah, we did. We expanded our coverage to Stargirl, Superman and Lois, and at this very moment, we're talking about Jupiter's Legacy.
Yep, so if you like your superhero TV shows, then you've come to the right place, and that is Tomorrow's Legends. Check us out on all your podcast destinations, including YouTube now, where you can actually see us. Oh, and one last thing. Thanks, Libsyn, for being our host for 267 episodes and counting so far. Gideon, take us away.
Right away, Captain.
Okay, so before we talk about where have we been, where are we going, I want to let you all know about the podcast hosts Podcaster Gear Survey 2024. It is a super, super, super short survey that you can take in, I think, a minute and a half, 90 seconds. Bing, 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 bing. And you can actually possibly win a $200 Amazon voucher. in the prize draw. And you can give your email and do all the stuff if you want to. You don't have to do that. You can just take it. And it's really exactly what you see there. It's about podcasting gear and what you're using currently. Super easy to go. I cannot wait for them to put out the results because the podcast host does some really great surveys and they are very, very centered on the independent podcaster, really tapped into the community. So go do it, people. Woohoo. All right. Where have we been? Oh my gosh. All right. So our live event in February, it just happened last week. It was amazing. It was called Elevating Your Podcast Expert, Tips on Production, Editing, and Collaboration. And it was a panel with Dominic Lawson, Jean-Claude Canal, and it was moderated by the amazing Latrice Sampson Richards, who recently won the Sonic Bloom Icon Award, which was really amazing. It's all about production. So please go check it out. It is amazing. It is currently live on YouTube. How about you, Eric? Where have you been?
I was at Podfest. We saw each other in person.
Yes,
that was amazing.
That was so
yes,
fun.
and I'm glad I did, because if we hadn't stopped and talked at that point, we probably wouldn't have been able to coordinate and cross paths again. So
you're right. You're totally right. There's something about me. Listen, I had a great time at Podfest, by the way. It was really fun. I wish I had more time. That time that we saw each other, that was the only time I was on the show floor. The rest of the time I was not there. So I wish I would have been able to be there longer. But, oh, yay, you've been at Podfest. La, 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 la. And where are we going? We have some pretty awesome events happening in March and April that I cannot really say at this time, but they're going to be so good. So number one, please subscribe to our YouTube channel. Honestly, such great stuff, such great work. And also follow us on social channels too, because we are going to be announcing some of these events that are coming up on our social. So wherever you are, we're at Libsyn. We are there. How about you, Eric? Where are you going?
Yeah, well, I'm going to go back into my studio and record some more podcast episodes. So other than that, I've got, some tentative things I'm thinking about going to in the future, submitting speaker submissions and things like that. But yeah, the place you'll really find me is at beyondthetodolist.com, where every week I'm delivering brand new episodes.
Love that. What's been one of your favorites that you did as of the past?
Oh, gosh. I've got one coming out. I think it'll be out by the time this is out, with Charles Duhigg about super communicators. And I got to tell you, as a communication major in college, some of the stuff that he has brought it with this book. This is a book all podcasters need to get. So I had a great conversation with him talking all about how we can be really good communicators. And in fact, super communicators. I loved it. One of my favorite episodes I've done in a very long time.
Oh my gosh, I can't wait. If it's out, I'll put it in the show notes, people. If not, you will definitely see Beyond the To-Do List linked in our show notes. So just head over there, follow the show wherever you get your podcasts, people, wherever you get your podcast. All right. So in real life, Rob will be at NRB, the National Religious Broadcasters event not here in Nashville. I'm not in Nashville. This is Rob's in Nashville, February 20th through the 23rd. And he will be there exhibiting at that show. And Libsyn will be at Podcast Movement Evolutions in LA, March 26th to the 29th. Plus NAB's main show in Las Vegas, and that is the April 14th through the 17th. The podcast show in the UK at the end of May. So May 22nd to 23rd, Libsyn will be exhibiting there. And none of us here in the show, I don't think you're going. Are you going, Eric?
No.
Okay. Rob nor I are also not going. So we won't be there, but the podcast show will be there. Then Podcast Movement, the main show in DC in August 19th through the 22nd. And yes, we are going to be there. Libsyn will be there, and we cannot wait for that. Are you going to be attending, do you think, Eric, this year?
I'm hoping to, yes.
This is awesome. Then cool. Then we can see each other. Now, Rob says if you are not going to the shows I just mentioned, and you host on Libsyn, and you want your cards at the show, your podcast cards, your little cards, please email rob@libsyn.com, and he will give you his address, and you can mail him your business cards, and they will go to all these shows for you. But please only do this if you're not going, because if you are going, guess who can take their cards with them? you can. And then you can put them on the table when you're there. So don't do that if you're going to be there. And again, finally, don't forget to send in your feedback for anything that we did or did not mention in this episode. You can record that feedback and email it to us, thefeed@libsyn.com, or you can call us at 412-573-1934, or you can use SpeakPipe at speakpipe.com/thefeed. So do you have anything else before we finish the show, Eric? Is there anything else we need to leave the show with?
I think that this has been a great episode, and I think that everybody misses Rob, but I hope I filled in adequately. I miss you, Rob.
Oh, yay. Thank you so much. I'm so glad that I had you here today, and we'll chat with you guys in a couple of weeks. Bye.